in the workshop. And one of the things they do with the kente is make it into ties, as well as other things. A number of which in places down in Kensington and other places, and in other places as well, Joan is selling to try to help support what the students are doing. Proud, lucky to have one, proud to wear one. But that's sort of the physical evolution. This is during the actual dedication, and walking in traditional garb at the top of the step on the way in there, we're looking at his back, is Togbede, who is the chief elder. Is that what he's or the head chief? He's the head chief of the village of Cledjo. Head of the elders, who had a meeting with Joan 6 years ago, but it was quite the interesting meeting. And it's not this picture, I chose the wrong one, but it's okay, it's all the same. He and Joan together held the scissors and cut the ribbon to dedicate the workshop. And the fact that he and all the elders came to the dedication, and he made a speech saying, this is important, this is valuable, this is good for Cledjo, and eventually said afterward that he was not only proud to be there, but that he and the chiefs are going to be buying kente from Joan's clients, and the heads of the village are going to be wearing their kente at ceremonial occasions.
Which is huge, because people with disabilities, they won't hire.
Right, that's
so the fact that these heads of this town will wear our cloth. Oh my God.
Yeah, yes, she's trying. Yes, but it is, and congratulations. I mean, it is an amazing achievement because while it's not easy to get together money and it's not easy to build a building, it's way easier to gather money and build a building than to change hearts and minds. And what Joan has done in Ghana is to open hearts and minds of people who are not open. It's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So it was really, that was the amazing, while we were there, we met this woman who has an orphanage in the town that actually is now turned into a school because it has no relationship with the town. So it's nice that it helps young people because it's always good to help young people. But the challenging, hard day-to-day work is helping other people see the world in a new way, because every time we do that, it helps us see the world in a new way. Right? There's nobody Jewish anywhere in the area, which in its own way, I admit, is also very nice. But there's no more tikkun olam than this. This is about tikkun olam. This is about repairing the world by opening up our minds and hearts to what the world can be. And so it was an amazing opportunity to have, and I'm amazed and proud of what Joan has done there, and excited that it continues to work, and that she's building the women's residence, and they're becoming a charity, and yada, yada, yada. Lots more things to hear about that, but we have a lot to talk about tonight, and we only have 11 more minutes. No, I'm kidding. We have much more time than that. But this part of the trip was really quite profound, and again, was about a reminder that if one person can do it there, and we spend most of our time complaining about the awful stuff that's on the news or on the internet, how much better can our world be if instead we just get down to the work of making parts of it better? And we tend to think that we can't, but this is proof that we can. So it's a good thing for us to keep in mind, and I hope you're half as inspired by it as I am. This is a wonderful picture that's too dark to see. But that's okay, because I don't have the permission of all these small children in the picture. This is Temple Sinai 4.5 years ago was instrumental in the founding of a new Reform synagogue in Beersheba. The synagogue has since come to be called Ramot Shalom. Shalom, of course, means peace. Ramot means heights, but it's also called that because it's located currently in a neighborhood called Ramot. Ramot is a new neighborhood of Beersheba in the north part of Beersheba, and is mostly made up of young families, most of whom have no opinion for or against Reform Judaism. They're just pretty much unaware of it. Why do I say it? Here's a really good statistic and a really challenging statistic that I learned while I was in Israel. Okay? In polling that took place this calendar year, 2018, professional pollsters in Israel, taking a completely wide range of Israelis, found that in polling Israelis, it's fun as a question, what percentage of Israelis said that they have participated or been present at some kind of a service or life cycle event led by Reform movement leaders? What percentage might you guess? You can guess by yourself. The percentage in today's Israel of Israelis who've been to a life cycle event or service or event under Reform auspices is 50%. 50. Okay? So it's 50%. So when we think, oh, Reform is tiny in Israel, oh, Reform is new in Israel, oh, we're not really established in Israel, it's easy for us to underestimate some of the new excellent things that have been done. Right? 10 years ago, there were about 30 Reform congregations in Israel, and now there are almost 60. I will personally, let's see, how generous am I feeling? I'm going to give you the answer later, not now. But I will personally write a certified check, how generous am I feeling tonight, for 10,000 Canadian dollars to anyone who can name the 4 places to live in Israel that have the strongest Reform youth groups in them. Okay? I make that generous offer because without learning that by meeting the leaders themselves, I could have guessed for 3.5 months every day and never would have gotten it right. Because the Reform movement in Israel is much more widespread, much more present than it ever is before. I'll give you a terrible way to know that. I'll give you 2 terrible. You know what terrible way to know that? Many of us have heard of Women of the Wall. Yes, that every Rosh Chodesh, every first day of the Jewish month, there is a women's service in the women's section at the wall. I was there just a couple days ago. It was Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. A month earlier, I was there on Rosh Chodesh Sivan to be emotionally supportive of the Women of the Wall because I believe in what they do. And are Israelis for Women of the Wall? Are Israelis against Women of the Wall? Just so you know, the answer is no. That's the answer. They're not for, they're not against, they don't care. It's like asking you how many times this year have you gone to the CN Tower? I'm serious. Because while the Kotel is not, the wall is not just a tourist attraction, to be honest, for most Israelis, that's about how much it plays a role in their life every day. So it's not something that's important to them. And the Women of the Wall, to be clear, is a feminist organization. Right? It's an organization that, again, that clearly is not a Reform organization. How do I know that? Well, it's in the women's section. It's made up of only women. They pray separate from the men. In the service they pray say Musaf. They say an additional service remembering the sacrifice that was offered on Rosh Chodesh. None of those things happen in Reform places. Okay? And while I was there were a number of extremist counter-protesters, and all of them were chanting slogans against the Reform movement. Now, you should be happy about that. Because in a place where nothing Reform is happening, they're complaining about the Reform. Because what it means is that in Israel, the brand that's not Orthodox, that's recognizable to people for good and for bad, is Reform. To the point where even when people, and again, the people there happen to be ultra-Orthodox, but they in no way represent the ultra-Orthodox parties or people. They're the extreme of the extreme. But I found it really, in a sad way, supportive. That where these bunch of secular and Orthodox and Reform feminists are all praying, the protests are all about the Reforming. That's plural for Reform Jews, right? Because people are aware of us. And many of you may know, I don't watch a lot of TV. But the Israel Reform Movement, with whom I volunteered for my 3.5 months in Israel, I'll tell you a little more about that soon, has offered to pay me to live in Israel, which I'm never going to do, I'm here. They've offered to pay me to live in Israel and once a day turn on my television. Why? Because while I was in Israel, I had a television all the time. I turned on the television to check the news 5 times. And 3 of the 5 times, Rabbi Gilad Kariv, the president of the Israel Reform Movement, was on the television when I turned it on. So I told Gilad I should turn on the TV every day so that they'd ask him to come talk. But while he's not on 3 out of every 5 times, he also is a regular and significant presence in Israeli culture, on Israeli media, on the news, being asked sometimes to talk about things that are specifically Reform, but the second time I turned it on, he was invited on the basic government-sponsored news program to talk about creative ways to make your Pesach Seder interesting to the people who come and to the children in particular. So it was amazing to see the progress that we have made. And we need to spend a lot less time telling the sad stories, though they're real and we have to acknowledge them, and a lot more time telling the success stories. Because there are. But we tend to tell the stories that are about conflict and anger in politics. And most of any country, Canada or Israel or anywhere, is not about conflict and news and politics. It's about everyday life, and we got a lot of everyday successes. At the same time, we have a long way to go every day. So, in this survey, just before I move on to another picture, in this survey, yes, they did say that 50% of Israelis have been to an event under Reform auspices. And when they asked a different question, they said, is there a Reform synagogue in the town, city where you live? 50% of the people said, I don't know. They don't even know. Right? And they were just as likely to say, I don't know, in a city where there is a Reform synagogue as saying they didn't know in a city where there isn't one. So we've made amazing progress, but we've got a long way to go. And I'm proud to say that Temple Sinai has more to do with that progress than any other Reform synagogue outside of Israel in the world. I'm going to say that again because I'm very proud of that. I was talking with the executive director of ARTSA, not ARTSA Canada, so amazingly led currently by ARTSA, the world's biggest liberal Zionist organization. And I was talking to Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who runs that organization. He and I were talking at the Reform Movement Biennial. That was my last couple of days that I'm going to show you a clip from at the end. And he and I were talking about various things, and I told him what we do, and he said, nobody in the world is doing as much as Temple Sinai Toronto. So good for you. And each of us is part of that. Should be very proud of that. And I'm certainly very proud of that. It's a wonderful thing. So this dark picture that you can't see, I couldn't really take a good picture, first of all, because our Reformed synagogue in Beersheba is in this little tiny rented apartment. So it doesn't have a proper synagogue yet, and we're not there. But I couldn't get a good picture because I couldn't, the whole place was filled with these families with their little children who were wearing their first Purim costumes, hearing their first Megillah reading. And people who definitely not only wouldn't have gone to a Reform Megillah reading, they wouldn't have gone to a Megillah reading at all if Temple Sinai and the Israel Reform movement hadn't helped create one of the newer Reform congregations in Israel, Ramot Shalom of Beersheba. And it was amazing to see these families and these little kids. It's a better picture when it's not up on a big screen. But it was just really exciting to see the kids. And just so you know, we were in Israel. After the kids, there's a program that used to be called EIE, which is high school in Israel. It's now called Heller High, which is named for a donor, but I have a terrible time with that name because every time somebody said Heller High, I said water. And so it was just very uncomfortable for me, and I was not popular for doing that. But we were told that I should make sure to be in Beersheba for Purim when I was planning my time, because Heller High was going to send a bus of 50 teenagers to our Reform synagogue in Ramot Shalom for Purim. So I said, great. So when I got there in Israel and called into the office of the Reform movement to say who I should check in with, I said, and who do I talk to about coordinating, about that evening? And they said, oh, they're not coming. Okay? Just so you know, it's Israel. So they didn't come, we didn't have anything arranged, we didn't have anything planned, we didn't have any food, and they showed up anyway. So we finished with the little kids. They went off with their bus to get pizzas. They came back, ate pizzas outside. I did an impromptu English language Megillah reading for these teenagers, including one of our wonderful young men on the program. There's Josh and me on Purim. Josh Dolgin, who went with our Israel trip last year and is now in high school in Israel. It was, wonderful to be standing there with one of our teenagers in a place that we help and continue to support. Rabbi Mira Chavav, who is the new rabbi of our congregation in Beersheba, who started the day after I got there, and who hopefully will be visiting Temple Sinai next November during ARTSA Canada Week next fall, so that we can get to know her. She's really a wonderful rabbi and a wonderful person, and she did the Hebrew Megillah chanting while I did the English. And we really had a good time with the kids, and she and I agreed that it never would have gone as well had we planned it. But that is in fact how Israel works. So I was there for Purim, and of course after Purim, the next big holiday, a month later, is Pesach. So, and I can tell that I got there before Pesach, because if you want a trivia question, I was there before Pesach for 5 weeks, so that's 35 days. I met lots and lots of people. I met new people every day, and the total number of people I met who did not invite me to their Pesach Seder was 2. Luckily, we have family there, and so I was with family for the Seder itself, because I missed being with my family, but it was great to be with family. The beginning of Pesach is really focuses on the Seder, not on the Shul services, even as wonderful as they are. And the seventh day of Pesach is significant because it's traditionally the time of the Song of the Sea. Right? So on Erev seventh day, it's a tradition now, these are clergy from 7 different Israeli Reform synagogues who have evening musical services for the 7th day of Passover overlooking the ocean. So that we can be not far from the part of the sea that they walk through on that particular day. I sat next to a woman. Everybody in Israel has a story, but we're not going to be here all night, so I can only tell you a small selection of the stories. That was mostly sitting on the ground, which is, I find, challenging. Luckily, my mother taught me to be early everywhere all the time. And so I was there early, and I got one of the few seats that was there. The woman next to me, who sat down, is in her late 60s. She's partially sighted. She can't see well enough to have a driver's license. She's 68 years old. She's a grandmother from the Washington, D.C. area. And 8 months ago made Aliyah to Israel. Leaving her children to bring her grandchildren to Israel to visit her. But she just loves Israel that much. So when we think about who makes Aliyah to Israel, I met a lot of people, and we're right and we're wrong. There are a lot of different kinds of Aliyah stories than we think. Some of the most active members of the Reform Synagogue in Beersheba, most of them are Israelis, born and bred, but two of the most active Olim made Aliyah from Bulgaria. So again, it's phenomenal, the variety of possibilities and stories. After Passover, we get into a time of year that we just referred to at a meeting today as the Yoms, right? Because it's Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, and Yom HaAtzmaut. And so in order, Yom HaShoah at the end of Nisan comes first. And again, we have our new exciting partnership with Ramot Shalom of Beersheba, and our long-term exciting partnership is with Keilat Yozma in Modi'in in Israel. We've been partners with them since they had two portables that were plugged down basically in a parking lot, and they said, that's your Reform synagogue. They now have a synagogue building, although they need a bigger, better synagogue building, and a government-recognized, government-funded Reform school, K through 6. And this is the Yom HaShoah program at Yozma's school, with all of the kids there. And psychologically, again, stories, who are Israelis, right? So every one of those kids, I think, I'd have to check, but every one of those kids was born in Israel. But part of their ceremony, a different class of the grade 5 or grade 6 leads the Yom HaShoah school ceremony every year. And part of it is the kids in the class who have a grandparent who was a victim in the Shoah or survived the Shoah come up and say their name and where they're from and who they are. And I'm telling you, it was 80% of the kids. 80% of the kids. So it's a reminder, Israel is 70 years old, amazing, exciting. But the story of the Shoah, I know, is very important to us here at Temple and is very present in Toronto as communities in the world go, but in no way compared to Israel. The numerical presence of the Shoah in Israel is so different than it is here. And never would have thought of it if I didn't have the privilege of being in our partner congregation and seeing these amazing, bright, committed, annoying, challenging kids normal like everybody else, but growing up reformed, and to see that most of them, the Shoah is a personal, their family story. To a totally different percentage. It's not a matter of validity, it's just something that's different than here. And it was really a fascinating thing to see. And I spent a lot of time at Yozma's school talking to the kids, talking to the teachers. Again, very Israeli. One Friday morning, Rabbi Nir Barkin, a good friend and the rabbi of Kilat Yozma, said, he and I met at his office, and he said, I'm going to do a Kabbalat Shabbat program with the grade 6s. Do you want to come? And I said, yeah. He said, well, then we better hurry because we're late. So we got in the car and went. We got there 10 minutes late, and we started an hour later. If that's you, you should consider Aliyah, because that's not how time works here, but it is how time works there. But I ended up having a 20-minute conversation with an Israeli father about why his son is in grade 6 at a Reform Movement school. So many stories, so many limits on the ability to tell them. So they do have a school, but they also have kindergartens. This is their gan. This is all the kids from the gan sitting in the Butel courtyard. Right, Austin and Annie Butel have been wonderfully supportive of so many worldwide Jewish causes, and Yozma very much. This is the Butel courtyard. And the kids all have their little blue and white keppalas on there, so adorable. And let me just, I don't remember if So we did wonderful things on Yom HaAtzmaut as well here at Temple, even though I missed them, although I was present in video for part of our adult celebrations. But the kids are all facing these people. Who are these people? These people are Israeli soldiers, Israeli police, Israeli firefighters, Israeli prison workers, all in uniform, and all direct relatives of the kids sitting there. Right? Because when you're Israeli, somebody in your family's in uniform. And it's just a reminder of something that I think we need reminders of the difference. It's I love the one woman that you can't see her here. She's just to the left. They're all wearing boots and flats. One woman was in pumps, was in heels, and she's the one who works in prisons. I still haven't figured that part out, but I didn't know what to do about that. But the level of service and the respect for service in Israeli society is a reminder of a basic Israeli, but a basic Jewish value that we shouldn't forget. I'm not talking about services, I'm talking about service. About stepping up and taking our part in the community, and to watch the kids and to see that that's totally normal. I mean, we don't need to raise our hands, but how many of us have a member of our family or their work wears some kind of military or almost military uniform? I'm sure very few. But it is basic to being Israeli, and it's not just the things we read in the news or that we hear about. It's a basic part of the society, and it was an inspirational thing to see these kids all looking at their Jewish role models. That's what they're looking at. Jewish role models who are all helping